Hey everybody, it's Pete Carmasino again here at Chaikin Analytics. I'm the Chief Market Strategist, and we're talking about, of course, Nvidia today. This has just been one of the most compelling pieces of, I should say, information or most compelling stock we've been following now for more than a year. And I'm going to get to that point in a minute because this didn't start 12 months ago, folks. It started back in January of 2023. Now, I'm going to show you on our chart where we saw it. We saw this name materializing, I think, before most people did. And we'll show you where the power gauge started to really upgrade it and hasn't changed really since. The trend obviously has been strong and even had a consolidation period there for a few months between about that 390 to 500 range. It kind of was back and forth, back and forth. There were a lot of non-believers in the AI theme to see how durable it might be. But I think NVIDIA proved that it's pretty durable with the numbers that came out yesterday. Obviously, the data center was the standout with revenue growing roughly 23% quarter over quarter and over 420% year over year. That's amazing. Okay. On top of that, a 10-for-1 stock split, pretty amazing again for those shareholders who are going to be benefiting from it. And even though the markets now have started to sell off, NVIDIA is still staying strong, up over 9% as I record right now, hitting highs that we haven't seen on the stock ever. So these are all-time highs today here on May 23rd. But there's one other thing that NVIDIA is really impacting. It's obviously impacting the overall market. At one point today, it was about 30 to 35% of the entire move of the S&P 500. However, that has changed, and I'll tell you why. We know the S&P is a cap-weighted index. It's got its other brethren in there with the Mag 7. The other 6 of those 7 names were just unable to kind of participate as well as NVIDIA did and really has started to pull the indexes down. So I want to look at NVIDIA at where it started on our charts, and then I'm just going to briefly, really briefly touch on what I think is impacting the current situation. The S&P really coming in a little bit today, but also the equal weight showing that the lack of participation of the other names in the rest of the indexes is kind of, sending a mixed message here today on Wall Street. All right, let's dive in and take a look at NVIDIA right now. All right, folks, you know our charts if you've been following any of the work that I do. This is our Chaikin chart, and we've got really a 1-year look. And I use this obviously all the time, and it's where the default chart lands on a 12-month look. So previous 12 months starting back there in May, that was around their last earnings report, again, where the stock popped to a new high, and a lot of people were very euphoric over what happened. But then it consolidated, right? It really consolidated between about $400 and $500 a share, roughly speaking. And even after a couple of really big earnings numbers, a lot of folks were just kind of watching this. Now, our power gauge was back and forth basically only because it had gone up and down, above and below, I should say, our long-term trend. Our power gauge adjusts for that just in case we start to see a downward trend materialize in a name. That didn't happen. And you know why? The relative strength never really broke down versus the S&P. And that's one of the indicators that alerted our team here at Chaikin that NVIDIA was starting to change trend back in January of 2023. I got to go to the 5-year to look at it because we've got obviously a longer term situation. When it started back in January 13th, on that specific day, we saw our relative strength start to make a big change on the upside. The power gauge caught up shortly thereafter, really upgrading the name somewhere around that beginning of March area, right after another big earnings report. So what happened was our technical indicators were flashing, hey, take a look at this name. And then our fundamental indicators caught up and gave us a lot more confidence in the name from that point on. So looking at it from that standpoint, you're talking about a $200 to $220 name that has moved higher. But it really started from the technical standpoint of around 155 or to 160, almost 165 a share back in January. Okay, we're going to briefly touch on the S&P. You can see during the course of the day, this is our 1-day chart. You can see right at the beginning of the open, because of NVIDIA and those spectacular earnings, the market pushed higher. Now you're starting to see kind of roll over and a different situation is taking effect. And as I said, NVIDIA cannot hold up the market by itself. It needs its brethren here in the Mag 7 to kind of help out. Now you see I got a couple of indexes locked in here as well, but there's Tesla, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon all down on the day while NVIDIA is doing all the work and rowing the boat, but just not enough to keep the markets going. So the S&P is pulling in a little bit. That's okay. But the RSP, which is really the equal weight way to view the S&P 500 is really struggling today. And I'll tell you why. Obviously, because it doesn't have the benefit of the capital weight that Nvidia is helping on the S&P. In other words, the S&P itself is down about maybe a little less than 1%, 0.8, while the equal weighted S&P is down 1.4% roughly. So that's where you kind of look at what's happening when you see these cap weightings kind of push and pull markets in one direction or another. You know that that's how it works. That's a great way for you to kind of compare and contrast, seeing what's happening on the equal weight side versus the cap weighted side, between the RSP being equal weight and SPY being the cap weighted S&P 500 fund. All right, folks. That's all we have for today. Again, this AI theme is obviously durable. It's been an incredible, really 12 to 18 months of watching how this is materializing ever since that first ChatGPT video and surfaced and all the news articles started to rip around the end of 2022. That propelled Nvidia and other AI names, and now Nvidia in general is really propelling other components in other industries, be it data center or utilities, or wherever the case may be. But Nvidia is really the spotlight stock today. Again, blowout earnings, a beat and raise on guidance, and a 10-for-1 stock split. Doesn't get any better than that, folks. All right, we'll see you next week here on the Chaikin Power Feed video. Take care.